DLK, Digital Logistics Center of Excellence, and very pleased that joining us from Israel is Ofer Ein Bar from Wave. So we're talking about here really more about the physical side of the supply chain. We talked a lot about finance, and the point that I tried to bring across is that, of course, the two are not independent of each other, although that is sadly often how it's been, with the exception maybe of bills of lading. But digitization really gives us the opportunity to bring these two more closely together. However, we need to get those transport documents right. DLK have developed a lot of expertise in something that was talked about this morning, which was EMRs and CMRs and so on. Wave, which is an Israeli company, has developed expertise in bills of lading, which are much more about cross-border trade. So if I can, I'll start with you, Ofer, and ask you what are the challenges of digitizing bills of lading, and what progress do you think has been made and is being made?
Well, I think that the process of digitalization starts with actually education and recognizing the challenge and the benefits. Because we've seen, everyone here thinks about digitalization. And when we're talking about digitalization, everyone says that it's the right time, it's the right thing to do. There is huge benefit of doing it. But the process, when we're coming to actually do it, we see lots of organization, lots of governments, lots of parties that involved in the process that are waiting for something to happen. And the thing is that we are the parties that need to make the change. So the education part is the most important thing, because by that we emphasize that we know the challenge and we know the benefit and we should go there. Now, I don't know if to say luckily or unfortunately, but COVID was actually an accelerator to our business, huge accelerator, because during the COVID period, we've seen that organization and people and everyone recognize the need. Now they actually move to do something. What to do is a different question. How to do is also a different question. But that's the most important thing.
Okay, and so specifically, what progress has been made, you think, on bills of lading, especially during the COVID period? Now, you've got in Wave, you've got some big carriers, but it's still a market. I think the last statistics I saw was that 1 or 2% of bills of lading were actually electronic.
Correct. So we in Wave done huge progress, but progress was, let me say by this, Wave actually started its life in Barclays Accelerator. But actually, although Wave grew up on an accelerator of banks, banks were not the first to adopt. So we found a different approach to the market. We found a different crack into the process by going through the shipping companies. Now, this was also something that we started doing with the ability of going from semi-regulators, the IGP&I, that's the International Group of Reinsurance. They confirmed by naming Wave and other companies as eligible for doing electronic bills of lading. The first party to enter were the shipping companies. So we went through the giants, we went through MSC and Zim and Hapag-Lloyd and ONE, and getting the rollout with this in mind and with hundreds of thousands of bill of lading issued, we actually see the movement. Now, the push on the other parts of the industry is becoming from the users themselves, from the customers that want banks to participate, that want custom to participate, and all other parties.
Right. Okay. What's specific about the Wave solution? I mean, we mentioned a little bit earlier on. There's blockchain versus sort of more well known or more mature systems. What do you see as being the best technology for this area?
Well, I think that our approach is a bit different. Our approach was and still is a pragmatic approach. We're not going to teach the market and force the market to go on standards, on specific standards. If MSC has that bill of lading, we're happy with that. If that company has that invoice, we're happy with that. We're just the channel, we're just the platform. Now, we're ready for the next step. But I think that educating the market is something of step-by-step process. If you're jumping, and I spoke with Ulrika about the kaboom, if you go in with lots of things together that need a major change, then you'll get a pushback. So what we do is step by step. Okay. Go with your processes and we'll fit our process to that.
Okay, there's already a question that's come in for you about partnerships, specifically referencing S-Docs that's just been bought, I think, by, is it Refinitiv? Which is an interesting development in the markets. Refinitiv, who are, essentially an indexing service. So they've bought this platform. We don't know what they're going to do with it. Do you partner in and I guess maybe what this question also is touching on is interoperability, and this is maybe something we'll also discuss with DLK, especially when it comes to the need to ensure that documents that arrive from overseas can then be used domestically and work their way through a number of domestic systems, in this case Estonia and the Baltics. But what's your view on partnerships and generally on interoperability between different platforms? Are we going to a place where you think there's going to be one platform, as back to this point about the ecosystem versus platformization?
Yeah. Let me say to you the first and a very important thing. I don't know. I'm saying I don't know because actually no one can know today what will happen. In order to get interoperability, you need to have a legal environment that will support it. Now, as long as MLETR is only accepted by few countries and global trade is global trade, so you need everyone to be part of it. So if you don't have that environment, what we've done is created the legal environment. Mm-hmm. But how do you share legal environment? It's a good question. So when I'm saying I don't know, means that there is still at this point huge gaps in the process. We proceed, we work, we discover any cooperation that's feasible and that is doable. The cooperation need to be measured with the technology, with the legal environment, with the processes, with the parties. Okay? We're happy to talk, we're happy to process, we're happy to do and discover things. Where it takes us, I don't know at this stage. But I think that with your permission, I think that the opportunity is much bigger than interoperability. And let me say it by this one. Standardization, for example, need to create some rules. Let me talk about SWIFT. SWIFT is a rule book. is with lot of details through that process. Now, when you go in to do standardization, and standardization is very important for interoperability. Should we go into the whole details at this stage when we have only a newborn at this stage? So if we hold back and sit tight and wait for standardization and interoperability, what will happen with the market? Are we damaging the market by holding back and by not providing a solution today? Or we need to adjust and get the first thing going and the second thing going and the third thing going. And if there is an interoperability, then wonderful. And if there is standardization, then even better. Okay? But it will evolve. So don't hold back.
So also, I mean, you're talking about also setting an example, I guess, and you know, no company, no tech platform can hold back and wait for what may take a long time.
Correct.
Again, this comes back to, if you like, the VHS versus Betamax. What is going to be the standard pushed by two rival commercial companies? But I do find it fascinating about how about the interaction between different players, and I mean, what do you, in terms of how the market you see is evolving in terms of, well, EBLs with the news about S-Docs, Bolero is, I believe, looking for a buyer and so on. I mean, do you see more rationalization coming? And what's the threat to some sort of a relatively smaller player like yourself?
Well, I think that there is a likelihood that there will be rationalization in the market, but I don't know to tell anything about it because things change. Corporation may change the views on the market, and things will happen in the market. At this stage, I think we're at a too early stage to go through that route. So
Okay.
I think that
what does that mean for technology, though?
Well, technology evolves. We've seen, for example, when we're talking about Wave is a decentralized platform. When we seen the first EBL issuers, they were looking at a standardized approach, at a centralized approach. Now, I'm coming from the side that largely believe at the decentralized approach and of keeping the knowledge of each one of the parties by their own. Okay? So try to mimic the process, the actual processes that are in the market. Now, where it takes us is a good question. So when we're talking about technology, I think that the market will understand at the end of the day that there is a technology that is better used in a different forms and a different technology that is better used in a different use cases. Then we will see everything where it evolves to. So I do believe that in the market that we're playing at, and EBL is only the first use case, okay? But in this market, when we're talking about a global market, we're talking about a complex jurisdiction processes. We're talking about these are coming with MLETR, these are coming with a law in the UK, and the other countries are coming with less on that side. So these are places where technology like Wave can be dominant. Let's talk about it in the future. We see here next year.
Well, I hope so. It's going to be a regular occurrence. So I understand about the technology, and I think you're right. It's still it's still open season, whether it's going to be blockchain or something else. One level of standardization, though, is is around the actual sort of templates or the documentation, the documentation envelope, if you like. The Digital Container Shipping Association, DCSA, has come up with some models for electronic bills of lading. Is that have you adopted that in Wave, or is this part of your permissive approach to the extent that the clients want it, that you'll adopt it, but otherwise you're basically saying, I'm the tool that you can use for whatever template you come up with.
Exactly.
And it's better if it's standardized, but if it's not, it's not.
You answered my question because we don't care what template MSC will define that they want to use. Okay? If MSC adopt standardization, we can support it. We're happy, we're there. Okay? So our systems are ready for that. This is the side of the shipping companies, of banks, if we're talking about different processes. They need to define what they want. We are taking them to do it with the network. Okay, we will provide the access to every party and party in the network.
Okay, thanks. So one of the questions that's come up, and I'll move over to our DLK team, three strong. And I know you've got different strengths and want to speak to different areas. One of the questions that's come up already is what are the digitalization process? What progress is being made towards digitalizing warehouse receipts, which is maybe not something for this panel, but on FCRs, which I think is one area. So I think who wants to take that from the DLK team? I think that's your area, isn't it?
When we are talking about example warehouses, we can literally take the whole supply chain as a big warehouse, and there is a lot of goods, and at the moment nobody knows what goods are there and where are they, and this is the situation, and this is the big issue actually, because we heard many years Industry 4.0, we have factories which are working blind without any workers, we have stores, self-services, so we don't need people there, but still we are transportation between those factories or stores or warehouses with truck drivers who doesn't know even what is mobile device or how to use it. So 99.9% of the goods still moving by papers, and this is actually quite big issue in globally, not only in Europe or not only in Estonia, but it's everywhere. And we have started to figure it out, why is it so. We built 2015 initial group called Single Window Estonia. Before this, the single window concept or term was mainly known as a customs single window concept or maritime single window, or in Asia has been a single window concept implemented many years earlier already. But here in we have to figure it out how it will work in democracy, so where everybody can have their own thoughts and everybody can do what they and say what they would like, but everybody can also develop their own solutions. So basically we have two not good options, even to continue with papers, or we have hundreds or thousands small IT solutions that anyway doesn't work together, so we have the same problem anyway. And the worst scenario is that we have to combine those two bad solutions. Half of the transportation is on paper and half in some IT systems which are useless anyway. So we need rules, we need agreements with governments, we need institutions that will support the process. Then all the companies, IT companies, transportation companies, warehouses, factories, they are happy because they know how to do and then what to do. And this is basically I think the solution for the situation where we are. We have to know what we have to do.
Okay, so that's a very different approach from sort of what Wave is taking, which is the customer comes to me with his template, his envelope, and I will be the messenger. For you, it's actually really important that the governments define what that template is. Do I understand you correctly that you want, and often it's not governments that can do this. So, we talk, and this is where I'd like to expand a little bit into the sort of work that you're doing on freight transport documentations. Do you? I mean, you've explained already very eloquently the problems that that you have with inexperienced participants. How much? I mean, do you come up with the? I mean, given that it's going to take a while for government to get their hands around this, even in Estonia, it seems, and that we're dealing with some cross-border issues. I mean, do you think that you need to be pushing the solutions, and what solutions exist? So, for container bills of lading, we've got DCSA. Are there associations that are involved in standardizing templates and then and doing things like that?
Well, in the current world, there are a lot of different standards, and
Too many,
many people talking about standardization. I have heard terms also interoperability. We know what is multimodal transport, etc. But I think we have to understand which standard where has to be used, then we can even translate if needed. But to combine different standards in different options, because still, when we have physical good, it's physical good. It needs to be carried out physically, but the parallel process that could be ahead of this physical process is digital logistics. So when we understand in different countries globally what standard is used where, then this documentation, digitalization should be easy. Then it is very easy when I'm going to France, for example, and when I'm speaking France, they will understand me.
Okay.
But when I'm starting to speak Estonian, nobody will understand.
Okay, Larry, do you want to come in?
I just wanted to add to what was said, just that we have to change the logic, first of all. We are still on the paper logic, but the thing is, digital world that's from the figures. So we are all speaking different languages, but we have to work cross-border. And to understand what we are doing cross-border, we need the digital logic. So that is changing the world. Until we are still on the paper regulation, we are still on the paper logic, nothing happens. The benefit comes when we are changing our logic and logic of the legislation to the digital one. Then we will probably achieve something. Because first of all, we have to keep in mind that we have to find a client who pays for these services.
Yes.
Because these services are very expensive. So he must see the benefit. And if he doesn't see the benefit, that we are just transferring the paper to the digital, then it's not the benefit yet. It comes
how do you sell that? Because there's lots of studies about cost and efficiency savings, but they're all studies. Then you don't see that immediately, do you?
You don't see that immediately. You see that from that moment when all the things are starting to play together. When as we spoke on the lunchtime, when the doctor is doing today the operation, let's say from Estonia to Norway, he doesn't think about the legal responsibilities in this transfer from one country to the other, his operational skills. So, and in that moment, when he doesn't think anymore about this kind of things, then the benefit comes. Until you are using the new software, you're using the new solutions, and that's just a pain for you. You don't win anything. Mm-hmm. It must work automatically, and then it's working. And that was today in the morning. Very interesting part was we talked about ADAS regulation. Actually, and when we are taking, let's say, our biggest danger is cybercrime today. Let's say 99% of our clients, they are all honest. 1% is probably crooks, probably. We don't know. But the crooks, until they are not identified, they will exist. And what is the biggest problem today is the ransomware. So what is the ransomware? It's into somebody's pocket. We have to identify that one, into whose pocket that gets. And we are rid of the problem. So we have to consider our problems otherwise than just the data protection, for example. Our problem is elsewhere. It's not the data protection. It's the protection of the crooks, which is coming from the paper logic. So until we are getting to that point, it's miles to go still, but we have to fight for the same rights.
Yes. Okay. I mean, I understand. I mean, the benefits of moving to digital are sort of obvious, I guess. And you've touched on some really big issues there. But can we maybe go back a little bit? And one of the questions that's come in here is what are the good examples? Give some good examples of the documents that have to be created, primarily currently in paper, for transport of documents across different modes. So from ship to maybe to truck to rail. Ulrika, do you want to, or
No, just a few words until Ulrika will take this legal part of it, I think so. But the thing is, actually, we are all using in the different transport modes, we are using the same data set. Mm-hmm. We have shipper, we have receiver, we have places of loading, places of unloading. We have the characters of the goods and the quantity of the goods. So that's it. And actually what is today is airway bill, there is bill of lading, there is ECMR. But that is a question only about the responsibilities. Mm-hmm. About the responsibilities of the carrier, about the responsibilities of the insurer. So actually that is nothing to do with the transport. That is, right. that is the thing what we have to do with the loss in the final end. So, and you know, that is not so many losses as 70 or let's say 80% or even a little bit more are getting to the destination. So actually what is our today's biggest risk is also that we are starting to create the data which nobody uses. Mm-hmm. And that is also the problem because the energy is getting more expensive every day. And we have to keep the systems up. So we must be very smart to do our new software developments and the stuff like that, that we are really creating the information which is in use.
So when you say you're creating data, or we're creating, the market is creating data that's not used.
Yes, exactly.
What do you mean by that? That there is, how is this useless data being generated?
I mean the data which is not needed, it must be not uploaded to somewhere.
Okay.
You must upload the data when it's requested. When it's not requested, don't upload it. That is the thing.
Okay.
And all the data which is inserted need to be used only once.
Only once, and I think that's a good point, isn't it? And it's, so again, it goes back to this point about data versus documents. Maybe this is a good point at which to bring in Ulrika, because there does, we've talked about bills of lading and CMRs, and these different, which for lawyers are different documents, are different document types. The data is the same, though. Is the law the problem here? Because as Heiti said, really it's about what are the liabilities. First of all, what is the data? Do we have the same data? And it should be the same data done once, and not useless data being generated. But is the law mature enough at the moment to basically look at data, or are we still obsessed with different document types? You have to shout.
I have my lights on in the
back. You're on now.
Yes. So now I'm on. So these documents actually that we're talking about is a bit like Lauri says, it's a dead end, and we have to come back. And these documents are not there for themselves. They actually come from different pieces of legislation,
Yes.
from international conventions and different agreement groups. Like CMR is completely deriving from a convention, and ECMR deriving from an additional protocol, for example, and bills of lading from other regulations, that you have pieces of information that is being checked from these documents by different parties or by different competent authorities, which for checking have their own regulations, why and when they're entitled to check what and how this information should be presented. Should it be on a stamped document, or may now, as some of the pieces of new regulations allow, also be done digitally? So this law or legal mess is the beginning of this document mess that we're having. Whilst we are at the moment of change, because the E is allowed, but standards are not there. So we would like to have a bit of a backbone to which we would attach the digital sets now. And it was, like Heiti said, 2015 that we started talking about it in Europe, and everyone said, no. Digital would be nice, but the governments, the competent authorities would never be ready to accept digital, as each and every government is different, each and every EU government is different, globally it will never work. And there it stayed, but the European Commission thought the otherwise. They started to prepare on the example of the maritime single window, which had already been established and renewed now also in a higher standardized way. Also, it started then an initiative for a regulation that would say that in European Union, as of date of then to be agreed when it was initiated, all of the governments and competent authorities of all EU member states will be needing to accept digital documentation, digital format, digital data, and data sets. They only got into it later. But said that, that all the competent authorities have to accept digital documents if they come from a standardized format from certified platforms. Mm-hmm. And this seemed a crazy idea. All the stakeholders just went like, cool idea, but somewhere in the future. So we were, with Lauri, we were in the same committee in the European Commission, working with these regulations, and during the preparation there was still a lot of hesitance. The Commission was hesitant whether, like you said, the community will reject if you go kaboom, yeah? Suddenly there is an obligation. So they for long thought that it should be a soft opportunity. Mm-hmm. Soft opportunity for everyone, which then, after all, the community of carriers and industries, who actually are the main benefiters from this digital, they started understanding that if we could really have digital, let's have it stronger. Let's have somewhere a backbone where we can hold on to and say, it is not an option, it should be an obligation at least to all the EU member states to accept digital. So what happened was that August 2020, a regulation was adopted earlier, but then it came into force. That August 2025, which is now only how many years ago? 1, 2, 3.
3 years.
Yeah. So 2025 used to be like many years, but now it's very close.
On the horizon, yes.
It's closer even, yeah. And it should be that all the competent authorities of all EU member states are going to accept documents from digital platforms, and the implementing and the delegated acts, the ones that specify the actual procedures, how this is being done, are still in the making. We can all make it. for another 6, 7, 8 months. So next August, we will have the rules, the standards, the descriptions of the data sets, descriptions of the requirements for all the IT platforms that should serve all the community and also provide the competent authorities the opportunity to check the documents. So this is the legal term. Is that the kaboom? I would say maybe that is the kaboom.
Well,
I would say that the kaboom was the COVID, for example.
This is the next.
Yes.
It was a huge accelerator indeed.
Definitely. But I would, with your permission, Laurie, I'm thinking about what you said about we thinking paper, and we going and digitizing paper. But to go to the end point and then say, I'm thinking digital, and this is the way we should do, and you don't need all this paper stuff which is digitized, you're actually aiming to the kaboom. And the pushback that we'll have is huge because they haven't recognized the benefits step by step. You just dropped on them lots of work that they need to do in preparation without getting the buy-in from their side. And we thought that we shouldn't challenge them so much because the pushback will be enormous, and we've seen lots of ideas which are best idea in the market coming and flourishing, but when they actually coming to do something, so we see the pushback from the industry which says, okay, we don't want that, and then good idea dies there. So we don't want that good idea to die. We want to grow it up step by step, and don't go with huge ideas. So yes, we're doing lots of paperwork, but digital. And then luckily we'll be in the position that the mindset was changed, and now let's improve it to go to the digital step.
I agree with you completely, but the thing is actually the world is changed and the business is also changed. So good comparison is, for example, Estonian company Bolt. There is no legal grounds on the most of the operations what they are doing. There is nothing which is on the paper, but it works and it's a billionaire company. So the logic of the business is different. So we have to consider that the state's logic must be different, the operator's logic must be different, the platform owner's logic must be different, and also the banker's logic must be different. Otherwise there is coming wise, whoever, they will do that simpler. So these kind of dilemmas what we have today, we have to understand that the paradigm is changing forever. So if we are not on the track now, in 2 years' time, we are not there. We have two choices to go. It's harder. It's hard choice or even harder. So I think so. I agree with you that to show the danger to the industry, it is always very painful. So, and when they see that it doesn't match them logic, they will start to avoid you somehow. But there are always some allies whom you have to use to get the benefit in the final end. And our biggest goal today is a networking and connectivity. Until we don't create the connectivity between different platforms, between different industries, and between different fields of society, we don't get anywhere if we are all staying by our own. If we find this connectivity which will benefit the society, then we will be winners as Bolt and the others. So that's the way to go. I don't see any other.
So there's two basic ways, isn't there? There's, as you said at the beginning, there's this sort of state-sponsored or regional-sponsored change. And Ulrike, you talked about that with the CMRs, and then there is a sort of the dominant platform approach or the successful platform approach, where the market will come up. It's a bit like it was the difference between Microsoft and Apple. They're different operating systems. They've carved out obviously a huge market, but they've carved out their own part of it. But they essentially have standardized how we use computers on a day-to-day level. So Ulrike, you've talked about what's happening here in the European Union, but I just want to broaden it out, and maybe this is something that Ofer can offer also a view on, because you've focused very much on sort of inland transport documents. But what is the interplay and the integration, I can put it that way, the interoperability, and what problems are there when goods arrive at an Estonian port with a bill of lading, and it's if you're using Ofer's system, that the actual document itself could be any one of a number of different things.
What was covered and what is covered also by this EFTI regulation, that is the Electronic Freight Transport Information Regulation, is all transport modes. So all documents, and not intra-EU, but anything that enters EU as well. And it works based on the understanding that it's not a closed environment, that most of the goods are either import or export. And as well the streams of how this the standardization could best work through conversions or not, all across the oceans, I would say, and literally on maritime transport, because IMO is doing a very good work, and the same as EMSA, the Maritime Safety Agency, on data sets that have a global approach. It's not that you enter EU and then suddenly at the single window there's some misunderstanding. No, it's a globally functional standard and globally functional approach that is taken. And I've got this question so many times: what about China? What about Brazil? What about USA? But eventually you will have groups of standards. And groups of standards, and not necessarily groups of solutions like the Microsoft. Mm-hmm. So we need to learn how these standards can live their life and can be applied by many service providers. It just makes adaptation much more easier. Also the change of service providers for a specific company, for example, that they can quickly switch and they all have just changed the address, but the file types already work. And I'd say that as soon as European Union has also figured out how they accept what the plugs are when everyone is arriving at a port, not necessarily an Estonian port, can be Portuguese or Italian or whichever port, that they're communicated in a same way, and the procedures how to transfer to road or rail or connectivity of airway bills is sorted out, and the procedures and the standards are connected, not just the file type standards, but also the processes and the procedures and the joint sort of information bubbles function the same way. Nevertheless, not looking at which exact service you're using. So like Heiti said that, and there are hundreds of different mini bubbles of services, and may those also be eCMR services, for example, but they run completely differently. That's not helpful. So they should at least have the same standard, and then the procedures can continue. And that's what we're aiming at. And as soon as EU has sorted it out, the others have an easy choice. They either have the same global standard, because most of the EU standards that we're talking about reflect either the IMO standards or the UN CFACT standards. So they're not like their own inventions. Mm-hmm. Wherever there is a standard, the standard is being used, and it's global, it's wider than EU anyhow. And they can use that, or they can use their own, knowing that the conversion is one step and the responsive receiver is already known. So that it's simplification of procedures, more or less, that we're
So,
talking about.
ideally, as you say, we'd like to avoid a conversion process, conversion step.
The step, but if that is needed for whichever reason, why not?
Okay.
If that's already that you know what
Is
these
something
2 or 3 options are, because we have 2 or 3 options always, and I would say, like, my preference when we're negotiating in European committees with all the member states and with the association, the CSA, by the way, very strongly as well represented. Yes. So everyone understand that there will not be a win of one standard. That as a democracy, we should have like 2 or 3 available. One is maybe something that comes from an international convention, maybe a few of industrial standards or private standards that are being used. Completely fine. But just that you know where the dictionary is.
Yeah, where the dictionary is, and it's a big dictionary. Essentially, is what you're saying.
And there is going to be a big dictionary.
Yeah. Okay. So that's sort of mass scale interoperability.
Yeah.
So it's that's a nice halfway house between the sort of the platform approach and the completely open
and distributed.
Sorry.
And distributed approach.
Yes, and distributed approach. Exactly. Does that sound good to you, Ofer?
It sounds great, but
how to do it? Yeah.
We have first of all, how to do it. Second, you need to think about the other players. So when we go in, for example, for a letter of credit, now banks have their own long living processes for letter of credit. Now, for bank to adopt, let's say, instead of the paper document that we're coming with, to adopt the same paper document but scanned, it's a process. So we've seen that EUCP is there for how long? 20 years?
EUCP, no, is quite recent.
EUCP.
EUCP. Oh, the original
original EUCP.
The original is around 10 years.
Yeah, 10 years. So with 10 years in the road, and we've seen, when I'm talking with banks and I'm asking questions, have you financed sometime a transaction with an LC doing e-presentation using EUCP? I hear, well, we heard about it, we know of it, but we haven't done it yet. So why is that? Because it's a transition. And if we're coming to give them metadata, wonderful idea. Just let's take the data, all the data that you mentioned, Laurie, which is a very simple data, and push them only the data. Is that enough? Is that sufficient for them to be able to do it? Or they'll stand aside and say, well, we don't know how it works, and we wait for some guidance which we're failing to get. So it's a wonderful idea. Sorry, I'm with you, but it's a wonderful idea. But what's the way to get there? It's a good question.
You know that to get there, that is the world competition. And in the final end, we haven't yet thought about the data himself. So the usage of the standardized data, what kind of benefits it does give to us. We have today artificial intelligence. We have machine learning. So if the data is not standardized, how you are using that one? If you want to do the business in the simple resources, which are all available in the internet today, when you don't have the standardized data, how you will do that? So I think somebody will come sooner or later and break these necks who are sitting on the chair and waiting for the brighter future without doing anything. So I think there are always interested parties who will carry that through. That they are coming. They are probably on the school chair still, but they are coming, believe me.
And I will tell you more, they would not come
and they will
from
be
banks
younger.
because they'll come from the other financial institutions which are adopting much faster technologies, and they have tools, and they can arrange the budget, and yeah.
We have investigated this market for quite many years already, and our first ideas was also we will be very successful startup. We will digitalizing everything and flying.
The whole market will be yours.
Yes, it was like great ideas.
We still believe in that.
Yeah, absolutely. But when we investigated the market, especially in road transportation, because this is the worst situation, because in air cargo, I would say most of the shipments are digitalized already. Quite good is also by the sea or by the rail, at least in European Union. But when we are taking this road transportation, there are so many, so small players. They don't have any IT systems. They even don't need them. And this is the big issue. And when we are looking upstairs, it looks very nice. We will go and digitalizing everything. But in the shop floor, the picture is completely different. And when we don't understand the issues there, what is the drivers for the truck drivers to motivate them to change the way of working, and how we can automate the collection of data, or maybe even let the drivers just drive and collect the data automatically, then we are able to then we have this data, then we can do this data whatever we want. We can standardize, we can share the data. And the second part, what we have figured out is that this market will be, in the market will be a lot of different players for different waybill service providers. We are calling EFTI service providers. Big companies are developing their own system. Most ERP service providers were creating their own modules to there, but we have to exchange the data. We have to create a network, and we have recently finished the big analysis for the Estonian government regarding national access points, which is also part of the EFTI regulation that allows to exchange the data between the countries and then cross-border way. That this national access point or common access point should be quite neutral part that will exchange the data, because we cannot build European-wide mega database. Nobody wants it, and it doesn't work. So it means that we have to keep the data where it is and share when it's needed and when somebody will ask. Because when some police or customs need to be checked, some truck, they can ask, and we have to be able to answer to them, and we have to find in which service provider the data locates. This is how the market should work, and then there we need those standards to be agreed that we can read the data in same way.
Okay, so it's sort of like reading. It's the same data but accessible through potentially multiple systems. Who's going to store that data?
No, that's a huge difference. Today, when the tractor leaves to somewhere, or let's say the truck leaves to somewhere, it has always paper with him.
Yeah.
But in the future, or let's say in the digital world, that data is provided when that is requested. So you don't need to give that to everybody, or you don't need to upload it. It's a different logic. So that's the idea.
Which works with open borders, of course, as we have in Europe, and then it's I mean one of the solutions that was proposed in the UK after Brexit is actually that the idea of inland borders, automatic sort of reading points, so there would be sensors that could actually automatically read the data that's on a truck, so this is obviously a huge benefit when to stop congestion at the point of entry. So you can have zones, and I think this already happens quite a lot of Europe, but you've got customs zones. I think I remember seeing this in France, that there was a customs checkpoint sort of really very far inland, very far away from the coast, not really where you would expect it. So that's your sort of dream, the sort of automatic these sort of automatic reading posts, as it were. But and reading standardized data. So, but who stores that data then?
This data will be stored
each state
by service provider.
By each service provider. It could be multiple ones. It could be DLK or others. What's your business model for that? You want to be one of those service providers, or?
Yes, we would like to integrate those service providers. So we would like to be the system integrator, I would say, combining different services from different countries. We have worked out together with Finnish colleagues platform for that, and technically we are ready to do that, but business should be grow and then go ahead. Of course, this business model is quite rough also, because when companies are making papers, they would say that paper doesn't cost anything.
Yes.
They don't know how much the paper actually costs. And when we are talking about digital services, nobody wants to pay anything for this. But I would like to bring out one good value point here as well. It is quite good example from when we work together with Ericsson. It's an example that, let's say that the production has been financed, and that maybe even raw material transport would be financed by some banks. Then this digital data of this mobile antenna or any kind of device that need to be shipped to the other side of the globe is also data that need to be shared in real time with many parties, because paper you can give, so basically you have one-to-one data exchange, but the digital data should be shared with 2 parties, 3, 4 parties, anyone who will need this to plan their activities. And in that sense, value of the logistics will be in estimated time of arrival. So who are waiting to arriving the goods, they can plan their activities, and this planning can avoid many huge investments or waste of time or money, because this Ericsson example was that from the factory in Tallinn, the goods will be shipped to Germany, they will put on the plane and sending to United States. But there in the desert, some group of guys are waiting this antenna to put, and if the antenna doesn't arrive on time, they're waiting maybe week or months there, because it's quite long and expensive time. So it is not okay in that sense, and by sharing the data, all participants will know what is the situation, and they can avoid risk and plan their activities based on the arriving of goods.
Okay, I mean that's a real sort of utopian vision, isn't it, where we can...
Is it an utopian vision? Because this is a vision that says that your data is stopping being your data because it's stored on some centralized arrangement, and everyone that wants to get access and doesn't say that I want him to get access to my data will be able to have it. So for example, when we're talking about paper processes, when I have a paper and I define if I want to give it to you or to him, but it remains only between the two of us, and that's it. Yes. Now, if I have those guys there in the desert waiting for the antenna, and I think that they should know and get the data, I'll provide them a copy of the data. But when we're making some centralized arrangement, means that we have the big brother watching about everything, so it's not mine anymore. And
well, I think I mean that could be done by sort of permissioning, and I think what
yes, correct. But
so I think what our friends at DLK are saying is, this through using maybe a DLK technology, this is something that regardless of who your who your technology vendor is can be read across, across border and away from the border as well. To get back to this point about these sort of sensor points or reading posts that are inland, and the reason I say it's potentially utopian is there is it sort of implies that this is that IoT type technology exists regionally and cross border, and I think in terms of the cross borders, I want to come back to you, Ofer, on this. Is if something arrives on a ship, how easy is it? Do you think it's going to be for that to sort of plug into, to this type of technology in the port of arrival?
Today, when you're talking about the whole supply chain, when the container is arriving to the port, the information change will be interrupted, because port authorities will know that the container is arrived, but the customer who is waiting that doesn't know, because there is some papers that need to be given away, and somebody is putting into this information to the another system.
Correct.
So all these systems are not central and centralized.
Yeah.
The gateways are just made understandable and interoperable. And of course, we need all these identities and accesses and permissions sorted out and understood. Is it eIDAS? Is it not? Is it lever ID? Where does this fit? Whom? Where? What layers? Which integrations, machine to machine, do we need at each point? And it is not making your data available to anyone. It is making your data available, joint data, because you've created it jointly and you're holding it jointly and using it jointly, to the partners that should see it, quite like with your Google document.
So to the partners that should see it when they need to see it. So if, for
Only
example,
when
I'm
they need
sending
And
my
you're not sending
container
the whole
from India
document.
to the US, and at the middle of the way, I define that I wish to sell that container to someone in Europe. So if the data was transferred, it was already in Europe and in the US and everywhere around. Now, I would feel uncomfortable as a shipper if all my data is staying somewhere and available to, I don't know, the processes of, you see, when I'm selling you something, it's only a contract between you and I. And now you brought the European Union, the US, the many other parties to our contract.
But we're still having our contract in
yeah.
an IT system that we have been deciding upon it. And we're not disclosing it to anyone else if we're having this contract made. What we only extract from there is the information of what we need to provide, for example, for the carrier. The carriers will inform us that these goods are delivered. We would know, the recipient would know, the third party would know, but they wouldn't need to necessarily access the information. They would just, send notifications to you. So it is it's a crispy layer. I'd say there are many layers at first to overcome of the mindset of, yes, maybe someone will see all my data. I'd say if you have an internet bank, do you use an internet bank? You do? So you log in, you have some money on your account. You're transferring money to your colleague or a friend or to your customers sends you money. You're not afraid that they would suddenly see how much money you have on your account.
So let me take what you're saying to a checkbook. Okay, simple check. When I'm writing a check to you, does anyone knows what was written on it?
But if you are far away, then it takes like 50 euros and several days for me to get this check.
Correct. But I can make a transfer to you. If I'm making a transfer, it's immediate. It's going and leaving my account today and going to your account the next day, or depends on the countries that we're in, etc. But when I'm giving you a check, maybe to use as collateral for my rent agreement with you for the apartment, etc. So no one knows about that check, only you and I. And the banks doesn't know until you deposit the check. Now, if you're going to put it, for example, to a centralized process, let's do bank transfer, and then everyone needs to be exposed to the data. But there are data that are, at this stage, they're not public. When we want them to be public, we'll make it, deposit the check. Okay, but until that point, it's only between us. Same approach is the approach that we have about the commercial agreement between us for me to sell you something, and I'm shipping that thing through the sea or through a train or whatever, okay? Because it's only an agreement between both of us. When it comes to the station that someone else need to know, we'll make sure that they will know. They will have the availability or the opportunity to know it, but only then. And we don't store it centrally and give someone the key to control the data.
We don't store it centrally. We store it at our systems so that we can provide the access. That is the point of it. But we have, and that's where I'm talking about EU systems, whenever this contract, for example, the ECMR is a contract of carriage, and this document can be accessed by the competent authorities, can be asked to be seen. So in that sense, we have to have the readiness to provide that document for the competent authority to query that. And that is, we can discuss that we would like to stay on paper. We will have the opportunity to remain there, but we also have the alternative of going fully digital with the solutions that actually provide that, and not being a central solution, but more like a system of a network of systems.
Yeah, so it's a multi-centric approach, but essentially, an interoperable multi-centric approach, if I can put it that way, which, you know, in the context of the European Union, of course, is something that we can achieve across quite a large number of countries. But globally, and this is maybe I go back to my point about this being a sort of utopian idea. I mean, there's a lot of problems with data localization laws and the like. Countries, well, some in the Middle East, not Israel, I think, but others, and China. So I'm just this wonderful idea of data flowing seamlessly across borders, which I love, you know, and I think maybe the European Union can be a bit of a pioneer here. But you know, your business deals with shipment of goods across multiple countries.
Correct.
Globally. How achievable do you think this sort of vision is?
Well, I think it will have huge barriers, and we've seen it with other systems. You spoke about where the market goes, and we've seen that there are systems in the market competing with us which are based on centralized approach. And centralized approach means that someone says who owns the good, someone stores the data, someone is doing something with your application, with your documents, etc. And we've seen that it's not conquering the market. So I strongly believe that in a global market, even, you know, look at China versus the US. You cannot store document in a centralized center between those two countries. Okay? And I'm not talking about Russia today, but Middle East and India and everyone with a different approach and different legislation, etc. So does the bank need to approach a system provider to ask them, do I have the right to claim it? Or do they need to get it immediately when they get the document, so they know they're right? They know that no one will challenge it. No one will need to go to the owner to say, define who owns it. And again, things happen during a lifetime of a shipment. So with all these things, with all these events that happen in a lifetime of shipment, so someone need to balance it. Someone need to make sure that we have the ability to answer those events. Centralized system has its limitation from my perspective. We work harder to make sure that the decentralized solution will be able to match all those points,
Yeah.
which is huge challenge.
Yeah, that was my question, really.
But that's the solution that we believe in. You asked Lori about what we fight for. Yeah, we fight for having a good solution in place that will match all the events during the way. And then, that's the process.
We cannot fix, of course, everything, but I can make things always a little bit more confusing than they were before. So take the Airbus industry today. Airbus airplane has 3,000 spare parts, which are three-dimensional printable. So you can imagine that the file is in Singapore, the printing machine is here in Estonia. The file never leaves Singapore. The goods are manufactured here. You have bank transfers behind of it because the spare parts has exactly the same price as that had before. So the taxes have to be paid. So what do you think how the customs knows that this kind of transaction has happened? So the states must find solutions also for these kind of things. First of all, because the business is changed. And so do we. We have to find the solutions also. We cannot cover everything, and that is not our goal. But at least we must make it possible for the technology to be progressive. So, and when we are achieving that goal, then probably we are winning something. And then we probably will have the business in the future. If we don't do that, we don't achieve anything. So that's just one sample. There are millions of other samples in today's trade, how the things are functioning without anybody knowing about it. So, so that's the thing.
The shipment number or shipment is like the key. We can combine this information with transportation equipment data, with driver's data, with sender's data, receiver's data, so many sources, also expenses that has been made on the way, and calculate automatically taxes by that. So this is like the key for everything.
No, I understand, and this is why, of course, you call yourself the centre of excellence. To go back to your point, Larry, which is, you know, it's about finding the system that allows all this to happen in a decentralised way. And I think Europe definitely has the ambition certainly, and the possibility of doing that. I mean, you mentioned that the technical standards are not there yet, and I think that will be a big project. Okay, let me see if there's any questions here. Otherwise, I think we might call this a compliment. Excellent panel, insightful views. Thank you very much. The last, there's a question here about who are the difficult and who are the best geographical regions in terms of digitalization. I mean, I think we already said that Europe clearly is potentially an excellent one. And the interesting thing here, of course, is that as a big trading partner in a big region, the influence of what the Europeans are asking for is more than permissive. Effectively, it becomes a requirement. So when your customers start shipping from Asia into Europe, MSC or whoever starts shipping, they're actually going to have to sort of get in line with what the European Union wants if they're arriving at a European port.
Correct. Okay,
I think we'll sort of wrap it up there because we had slightly longer allocated to us. Probably we've taken up. Is that all right, Michael? Can we finish 5 minutes early? Yeah, thank you.
You just forgot something.
Sorry?
My presentation.
Your presentation. Okay, I thought you were going to do it.
Okay. So I haven't done it.
Yeah, I thought you were going to do it.
Okay. So let's talk
All
offline.
right. You can't do it in 5 minutes.
No.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry, yes.
But if you'll give me 15, I'll do it.
I think we're going to run over time then. Can we run over a little bit? All right. So Ofer's kindly put together a little presentation. Can I sort of ask you to do it in about 10 minutes?
I'll push it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So, wonderful. Is that mine? Okay. What am I doing wrong? Ah, good thing. Okay, that's the old one, but never mind. I'll rush through the process. So, global trade finance. We actually have two pillars to talk about. Trust among the players, and I'm not talking about digital trust, etc. I'm talking about there is goods which are shipped from somewhere to somewhere, and there is money that need to be transferred from the second party to the first party. Do they trust each other? Good question. Normally in the business, in the global trade, we say that they don't trust each other. So moving ahead, we're talking about, if we look at this chart, we're talking about exporter and the importer. And there are many ways to make the payment among the parties. But the only process that balances the trust is actually letter of credit, because in any other form, someone need to be stronger and force payment terms on the other party. So LC actually is the only way that we balance between the parties. Now, if we're talking about the market, and my data is relevant for 2019. Why 2019? Because actually we had 2 years after that of COVID, which fluctuate along the way, and it cannot be measured in terms of what we used to see in global trade. So 2019, we had $19 trillion of global trade. Now, when we're talking about global trade, we're talking about how much is going through the maritime shipment and how much is going through the air shipment. About 10% go through air shipment. So actually, when we're talking about LCs, LCs cannot tap it. That market is actually not the relevant market for the traditional LC. And if we continue to look at it, we can divide the geography to short shipments, which actually take, for example, UK to France. If we send documents and we ask banks to be involved in, so we'll have to bear cost of storage, demurrage, all those costs, which cause us to pay a lot. So if we define the market, about 40% of the market going through the maritime shipment through between short shipment adjacent countries. So again, this is not a financeable tool to be used as an LC for those shipments. So we stuck only with 50% of the $19 trillion. If we continue to look at it, we actually see that LC responsible only for 4%. But we just mentioned that LC is the best tool to balance between the risk and the trust of the buyer and the seller. So how come we use only 4%? And another 18%, about 18% is going through collection. But when we're talking about those 4%, just to go back to the past, 1685, same ELSI. But it was responsible for about 70% of the global trade. So what happened? So what happened is banks are missing out for the opportunities. How come? How come we missed that out? Now, our customer actually doesn't feel right with adoption of the ELSI anymore because they need to physically come to the bank. They waste money on document, couriers, etc. There is a process to make by them. They need to wait days and weeks for the document. They suffer from delays of the releasing of the cargo. We have a problem. Now, let's look at the other pillar, the financing. So actually, when we talk about the financing, that journey that you're seeing here, am I competing with your charts, Sean?
No, that's good.
Okay, so that's the document process on a shipment. So it starts with the manufacturing order and the factory and container and carrier and courier and another. All this process is huge, huge. But can we finance all of it? All those red circles that I made are things that we cannot finance even when we're talking about it. Because when the bill of lading is a good document to put some financing to it. But it's with the courier. We cannot finance it. So we have a problem with it. So we still have challenges, too pricey, okay? When we go into the document process, yes, we have the cost of the courier, we have the cost of all the processes and the ELSI itself. So too pricey. We have risk of fraud. At the end of the day, we got document, physical document. Do we like it? Do we trust it? Do we believe that this is an actual physical bill of lading and it's not a fraudulent one? We stay with the questions, and there is an operational risk of documents. Of course, documents can get lost. On the banker's side, who have seen document lost in the mail in the process? We've seen it. So actually, I'm going back to the ELSI process and say one thing, major thing. Banks can optimize the use of ELSI and the use of tools like ELSI and increase market share. And going to the market share, if I'm going to this one, yeah, this market share can be increased dramatically. Because if we're going digital, we can go for the 40% of the short maritime shipment. We can finance those. If we have a digital process and it's cheaper, okay? So we can tap the other 50% that didn't like us, okay? So this 78% become an opportunity, a live opportunity for the banks to work with. So going to, digitization. So streamlined process, no need for couriers, no need for the cost of the couriers, secure operation, no fraud. We know exactly who sent the document to us. We know to manage the document. We cannot lose documents anymore. The financial coverage, if you save all the time of the couriers, so we can put financing through all that period. So we're Wave, and I don't know how much time I'll have, but
I think that's about
just this slide. Wave is active in the, we have a network. The network allows us to push trade documents, all the set of trade documents between all the parties to the transaction. The unique thing is that our bill of lading, and it's not ours, okay? The bill of lading remains the same bill of lading of MSC or Hapag-Lloyd or Zim or any other company that uses our services. And the bill of lading is something that we can transfer possession and title holding on that document. So actually, when you're getting the original electronic bill of lading, you know that you're the only one who can claim the goods. We've done only last year more than 100,000 live transactions. So not a demo, not a POCs. These are actual cargo container going from somewhere to somewhere else. We say that we have more than 5,000 agents, sales agents, because we actually don't sell our product. It is sold by the shipping companies. If you'll come to MSC tomorrow with a container, they'll say to you, electronic bill of lading, correct? Because only if you have a good reason not to use it, will go electronically. So market change, yes, this is the market change that we are so much looking for, to adopt the market, to believe in what we do, and to see the benefit.
I think I'm going to have to stop you there.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Fine. But let me invite all of you to talk with me, and we can show you a demo or things,
Thank you.
wonderful things on top of that.